He stared at the last $50 in his worn-out wallet. The bills were crumpled, soft at the edges, as if they had been through as many struggles as he had. He held them between trembling fingers, wondering if they would last another day, another week, or if they would vanish before he could even breathe easy. His apartment felt smaller than ever, the walls closing in like a cage that had slowly built itself around him over months of struggle. The small room smelled faintly of old carpet and instant noodles, a reminder that life had become a quiet fight just to survive. He sank onto the lumpy sofa, letting out a sigh that seemed too heavy for one person to carry. It had been a long journey of bad luck and harder lessons. Jobs that seemed promising disappeared within weeks. Friends he relied on gradually faded away, some moving on with their lives, while he remained stuck in a loop of unpaid bills and empty stomachs. He had dreams once, big ones, filled with visions of starting his own business, traveling, helping people, and feeling proud of what he could achieve. But somewhere along the way, life had handed him one rejection after another, and he had started to wonder if the dreams were only illusions. The $50 in his wallet represented more than just money. It represented a choice. He could spend it on food, get something temporary to fill his stomach. Or he could take a risk, one last risk, to try to change everything. The thought of losing it was terrifying, yet the thought of never trying made his chest ache even more. For weeks, he had been watching local events, small workshops, and seminars that promised knowledge, networking, and opportunity. Most seemed out of reach, either too expensive or too far away. But this seminar, was affordable. Even if it meant spending his last $50, he stared at the flyer on the table. The words bold and bright against the plain background. Find your path to success, one step at a time. The tagline sounded cliché, almost silly. He laughed quietly to himself, shaking his head. Success felt like a word from someone else's life. But beneath the skepticism, a spark lingered. Could this be it? Could this small step actually lead somewhere? Maybe, maybe not. But he knew in his heart that doing nothing was no longer an option. Doing nothing meant sinking further into despair, losing hope entirely, and perhaps even giving up on himself completely. He dressed quickly in the worn clothes he had. The jacket patched at the elbows, shoes scuffed from endless walks to job interviews and grocery stores he could barely afford. He left the apartment, locking the door behind him, and stepped into the chilly morning air. The streets were already alive with people moving in their routines, chatting, laughing, rushing to offices and buses. He felt invisible among them, just another face in the crowd, someone unnoticed, someone struggling silently. And yet, he carried his last $50 in his pocket, a tiny treasure that could be his lifeline. The seminar was held in a modest conference hall downtown. The building was older, the paint slightly peeling, but inside, the air smelled of opportunity and coffee. People filled the chairs, chatting, exchanging smiles, and shaking hands. He felt out of place. Everyone seemed confident, already successful in small ways, dressed sharply, carrying portfolios and notebooks. He slipped into a seat at the back, hoping no one would notice the nervous tension in his hands. He opened the flyer again, pretending to read it, even though he had memorized every word by now. As the seminar began, speakers took the stage, one by one. Their stories were inspiring, their advice seemingly practical, yet he felt a flicker of doubt. Could he really apply these lessons? Could he really rise above the struggles that had held him down for years? The words echoed around the room, some resonating, some seeming distant. He jotted down a few notes, trying to stay engaged, trying to absorb something, anything, that could help him. During a break, he wandered to the coffee station, where a line of people chatted casually, holding their cups like shields against the world. He felt awkward, uncertain, standing there with his modest cup of coffee, trying not to draw attention to himself. That's when he noticed someone sitting quietly in a corner, observing the room with a calm, confident air. The man seemed out of place, but also somehow commanding, like he was in control without even trying. He was not flashy, not loud, yet there was a presence about him that made the room seem smaller in comparison, Curiosity got the better of him. He found himself walking toward the man. He had no real reason to approach him, no pretense or agenda, just a simple human need to connect, to be seen, to be noticed. "Excuse me," he said, voice barely above a whisper. The man looked up, meeting his eyes with a warmth that surprised him. "Yes," the man said, smiling slightly. I just wanted to say hello. This seminar. I've been struggling a lot, and I hope it can help me somehow," he admitted, feeling exposed. He could feel the weight of his life in the words, the honesty and the vulnerability raw on his tongue. The man nodded, his eyes kind but curious. "Why are you here?" he asked gently, leaning back. "What made you decide to come today?" He swallowed hard. "I don't have much left. $50, actually. It's all I have. But I figured I have to try something. Anything. I can't keep living like this." He looked down at the worn-out shoes on his feet, feeling embarrassed, ashamed even. I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do." The man smiled again, not in a condescending way, but in a way that made him feel lighter, less judged. "Sometimes the first step is the hardest," he said. "It takes courage to spend your last bit of money on hope instead of comfort. That courage says more about you than anything else." The words hit him like a wave. Courage. Hope. He hadn't thought of himself as brave in a long time. Not since life had taught him the hard way, that survival often meant giving up on dreams. Yet here was a stranger telling him that his actions mattered, that his choice mattered. The simplest words carried weight, more than any seminar speaker or motivational quote ever had. For the rest of the break, he found himself thinking about what the man had said. He watched the people around him, some talking in small groups, others scrolling through phones. He realized how much he had missed connection, guidance, and encouragement. All his life, he had relied on himself, believing that struggle was a solo journey. But maybe, just maybe, asking for help and listening to others could be the key he had been missing. As the seminar continued, he paid closer attention, jotting down notes more diligently, observing the methods, strategies, and insights shared by the speakers. Each idea seemed to spark another thought, another possibility. He realized that knowledge alone wasn't enough, but the combination of courage, action, and guidance could lead to change. His heart felt a cautious flicker of hope, fragile but real. By the end of the day, it felt lighter, as if a small burden had been lifted from his shoulders. The last $50 in his wallet had bought him more than a ticket to a seminar. It had bought him a moment of clarity, a connection with someone who saw potential in him, a glimpse of a future that was no longer completely dark. He left the hall slowly, taking in the city lights, the movement of people, and the sound of life around him. Walking home, he imagined possibilities he hadn't dared to dream in months. Perhaps he could start small, take one step at a time, follow guidance, and rebuild. He didn't have the answers yet, but he had hope, and sometimes hope was the first step toward everything. That night, he placed the $50 back in his wallet, not as a symbol of fear, but as a symbol of courage, the courage to risk the last thing he had, for the chance of a better life. As he drifted off to sleep in the small apartment, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, anticipation, a quiet excitement that maybe, just maybe, life was about to change. The days after the seminar were different. He woke up each morning with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. Even the small things, like making breakfast or reading the newspaper, carried new meaning. He kept thinking about the man he had met at the seminar, the one who had noticed him, listened to him, and offered words that had touched something deep inside. He didn't know who the man really was, only that he had presence, confidence, and a quiet authority that seemed to make the room brighter. He tried to focus on small steps he could take. He updated his resume, made a list of skills he wanted to learn, and reached out to old contacts. Every action felt heavy at first, but with each task completed, he felt lighter, stronger. Yet, even with determination, there was fear. Fear of failing again, fear that all this effort would lead nowhere. Every night he lay in bed thinking about the seminar, replaying the conversation with the stranger in his mind, questioning if it had all been real or if he had imagined hope where there was none. Then one morning, as he sipped a cup of cheap coffee, his phone buzzed. He almost ignored it at first, thinking it would be another rejection, another scam, another disappointment. But the message was unexpected. It was from the man he had spoken to at the seminar. The message was simple, just a few lines, but it carried weight. I saw your honesty at the seminar. I believe in potential. Let's talk. Are you free today? He stared at the screen, his heart pounding. Could this really be happening? The man had reached out personally. This wasn't some generic follow-up or automated email. This was real. He typed a quick reply, trying to keep his excitement contained. Yes, I'm available anytime. Thank you for reaching out. The meeting was set for that afternoon in a small cafe downtown. He arrived early, nerves buzzing in his stomach. He chose a corner table, trying to appear calm while his hands shook slightly. The cafe was busy, filled with people laughing, working on laptops, and sipping their drinks. He felt exposed, aware of every movement, every glance. He watched the door, waiting for the man who had unknowingly sparked a new fire in his heart. When the man walked in, he noticed him immediately. There was no grand entrance, no flashy gesture, just a quiet presence that seemed to make the space around him settle. He approached the table with a confident smile and sat down without waiting for an invitation. Good to see you again, the man said warmly. I remember you from the seminar. You seemed different from the others. Honest, nervous, yes, but determined. That matters more than talent sometimes. He nodded, unsure of what to say. I didn't expect to hear from you. I thought it was just a coincidence we talked. It's not a coincidence, the man replied. I notice people who have the courage to try, even when they have nothing left. That courage is rare, and it's valuable. You risked your last $50? That tells me you're ready to take a step. The question is, are you ready to work for more? The words were like a spark in dry wood. He felt heat rush through him, a mixture of hope, fear, and determination. I am, he said simply. I don't have much experience, but I'm ready to learn, to work hard, to do whatever it takes. The man nodded, studying him carefully. Good. That's exactly what I want to hear, but I need to know more. Tell me about your struggles, your goals, your dreams. Don't hold back. He took a deep breath and spoke honestly. He told the man about losing his last job, about months of trying and failing, about the fear that he would never escape the cycle of struggle. He spoke about his dreams, how he wanted to create something meaningful, help others, and feel proud of his own life. For the first time in years, he didn't feel judged. He felt understood. The man listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, his eyes thoughtful. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but firm. You've been through a lot, and I see that. But the path forward isn't about luck. It's about action. It's about learning, adapting, and being willing to take responsibility for your own growth. I can guide you, but you have to be willing to put in the work. Are you willing? Yes, he said without hesitation. I've never been more willing in my life. The man smiled, a mixture of approval and encouragement. Good, here's what we'll do. I have a small project at my company. It's not glamorous, it's not easy, but it's real. If you can handle it, if you can show initiative and learn quickly, there's potential for more. Do you want that chance? He felt his heart leap. A chance, a real chance. Not charity, not pity, not a vague promise of hope. This was tangible, concrete. I do. Absolutely. Good, the man said, handing him a business card. Start tomorrow. Meet me at the office. Be prepared to work, to ask questions, and to absorb everything you can. And remember, this is about more than just money. It's about proving to yourself that you can rise above your circumstances. He left the cafe feeling like he was walking on air. For the first time in months, he could imagine a future. The project wasn't guaranteed to make him rich, but it offered something more valuable, a path, guidance, and the opportunity to rebuild. That night, he prepared meticulously, studying the company's website. reading about the industry and trying to anticipate what might be asked of him. Sleep was restless, filled with dreams of both failure and success, but he didn't mind. He had purpose again, and that was enough to fuel him. The next morning, he arrived at the office early. The building was sleek, modern, and buzzing with energy. Employees moved with confidence, greeting each other, discussing projects, and typing furiously at computers. He felt nervous, a small figure in a vast space. But he reminded himself of the words from the cafe: courage matters more than talent sometimes. He took a deep breath and walked toward the front desk. "Here for the project," he said to the receptionist, showing the business card. She smiled politely and directed him to a conference room. There, waiting, was the man from the seminar, already reviewing notes on his laptop. He looked up, nodded, and gestured for him to sit. "Welcome," the man said. "Today is your first real test. The project is simple in description but challenging in execution. You'll need to research, analyze, and present your findings. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for effort, insight, and determination. Do you understand?" "Yes," he said, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. "I understand completely." The man handed him the project brief and he studied it carefully. At first glance, it seemed overwhelming, filled with terms and tasks he had never encountered. He felt a flicker of panic but pushed it aside. This was what he had wanted: a chance to prove himself. He spent the morning reading, taking notes, and asking questions. Each answer he received from the man was patient, clear, and encouraging. The more he learned, the more confident he felt. By lunchtime, he realized something important. He was capable of more than he had believed. Every small task he completed, every problem he solved, reminded him that the struggles of the past had not broken him. They had prepared him. The man noticed his progress and nodded in approval, offering subtle guidance that kept him on track without taking over. The afternoon passed in a blur of research, analysis, and discussion. By the time the workday ended, he was exhausted but exhilarated. The man gave him feedback, highlighting both strengths and areas to improve. "You've got potential," he said, "but potential alone isn't enough. You need to keep learning, keep adapting, and keep pushing yourself. The rest will follow." As he left the office that evening, he felt a sense of pride he hadn't experienced in years. The project had been hard, yes, but it had also shown him that he could handle challenges, learn quickly, and contribute meaningfully. And more than that, he had met someone who genuinely believed in him, someone willing to invest time and energy into his growth. Walking home, he thought about the journey so far. The $50 he had risked at the seminar had led him to this moment, to a connection that could change his life. The path ahead was still uncertain, filled with challenges and risks. But for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face them. He knew he wouldn't fail, not because life had suddenly become easy, but because he had found courage, guidance, and hope. That night, he lay in bed replaying the day, feeling a quiet excitement. He had taken the first real step toward change, and it had worked. The man from the seminar had seen something in him that he hadn't seen in himself, and that belief had given him strength. He realized that life didn't just hand out opportunities. It tested those willing to take them and those willing to learn, and he was ready for both. The next few days were a whirlwind. Each morning, he woke up with a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. He thought about the project and the man who had given him the chance that seemed impossible just a week ago. Every step felt new. Every decision carried weight, and yet he thrived on it. The city outside his window buzzed with life, a constant reminder that the world kept moving whether he was ready or not. He refused to be left behind. At the office, he found himself surrounded by people who seemed confident and skilled. At first, he doubted he could keep up. Every meeting, every task, felt like a test of his abilities. Yet, the more he immersed himself in the work, the more he discovered that his fear had been bigger than the reality. With each small success, his confidence grew. The man, the CEO, watched quietly, offering guidance only when necessary, letting him make mistakes, and teaching him to learn from them rather than fear them. The project he was assigned was challenging. It required research, analysis, and the ability to present ideas clearly. At first, he felt overwhelmed. He had never dealt with such complex tasks before. But he reminded himself of why he was here. The $50 he had risked at the seminar was not just money, it was a symbol of hope, courage, and commitment. He could not let it go to waste. He spent long hours at his small desk, reviewing notes, reading articles, and reaching out to colleagues for clarification. Every answer he received built a little more confidence. Every mistake taught him a lesson that made him stronger. By the middle of the week, he was beginning to see progress. The tasks that had once seemed impossible were becoming manageable. He was learning to think critically, to plan carefully, and to communicate effectively. The CEO noticed. One afternoon, after reviewing his work, he said quietly, "You're doing well. But now it's time for something bigger. Something that will test not just your skills, but your determination." He felt a thrill of both fear and excitement. "What is it?" he asked, leaning forward eagerly. "There's a new initiative at the company," the CEO explained. "It's a project that could have a real impact on our business, but it's complicated. Many have tried and struggled. I want you to lead a part of it, under my supervision, of course. You will need to coordinate with different teams, manage your time well, come up with ideas that are both creative and practical. Can you handle that?" He swallowed hard, the weight of the opportunity sinking in. Leading a part of a real initiative meant responsibility, accountability, and the chance to prove himself. It was terrifying yet exhilarating. "I can," he said. "I will do my best." "Good," the CEO said with a nod. "Your best is all I ask for. But remember, this isn't just about completing the project. It's about learning. About growing. About showing yourself what you're capable of." Over the next few days, he threw himself into the work. The project required him to reach out to different departments, gather information, and propose solutions. It was far more complicated than anything he had done before. Sometimes he felt like giving up, overwhelmed by the volume of tasks and the pressure to perform. But then he remembered the courage that had brought him here. He remembered the $50 he had risked, the hope that had driven him, and the belief that someone else had in him. He refused to quit. Late nights became routine. He stayed at the office long after others had left, reviewing data, writing reports, and brainstorming ideas. He faced problems that seemed impossible to solve, and yet each challenge became an opportunity to learn. The CEO was always available to answer questions or offer advice, but he never did the work for him. Instead, he guided him, pushing him to think critically and find solutions on his own. One evening, as he sat alone in the office, staring at his laptop, he realized how much he had grown in just a few days. He had learned to manage his time, to communicate clearly, and to approach problems with a solution-oriented mindset. He had faced fear, uncertainty, and self-doubt, and he had survived. More than that, he had begun to thrive. The CEO noticed his progress. During a brief meeting, he said, "You're showing more initiative than I expected. You're not afraid to ask questions, to challenge ideas, and to propose new approaches. That's a rare quality. Most people don't do that. Most people just follow instructions. But you're learning to lead." Hearing those words made him feel proud. For years, he had felt invisible, unnoticed, and incapable. Now, someone was recognizing his effort, his growth, and his potential. It was a feeling he had almost forgotten existed, a sense of validation. Not for money or status, but for who he was becoming. As the project progressed, he faced conflicts with colleagues who doubted his abilities. Some were dismissive, assuming that someone with no prior experience could not contribute meaningfully. At first, their skepticism shook him, but then he remembered the CEO's words. Courage and determination mattered more than talent alone. He listened to their feedback, addressed concerns respectfully, and demonstrated through action that he was capable. Slowly, their attitude changed. By the end of the week, even the most doubtful colleagues had begun to acknowledge his contributions. One day, the CEO called him into his office for a private meeting. The atmosphere was serious, yet supportive. "I've been watching you closely," the CEO said, "and I want you to know something important. The way you've approached this project, your effort, your persistence, Your willingness to learn is exactly the kind of quality that leads to real success. Many people fail not because they lack skill, but because they lack persistence. You, however, have both. That's why I want to offer you a bigger opportunity. He felt his heart skip a beat. Bigger opportunity? The words were both exciting and intimidating. What kind of opportunity? He asked cautiously. There's a new division being launched, the CEO explained. It's a chance to work on a project from the ground up, to help shape its direction and to be involved in something significant. I want you to be part of it. But this will require even more dedication, more learning, and more responsibility. Are you willing to take that on? Yes, he said firmly, without hesitation. I'm ready. The CEO nodded. Good. This is not a guarantee of success, and it won't be easy. But it's a chance, a real chance. Most people never get this opportunity because they aren't willing to work for it. You've earned it, and I believe you can handle it. That afternoon, he began preparing for the new responsibility. He studied materials, researched industry trends, and reached out to contacts for advice. Each day was a lesson in humility, resilience, and growth. He realized that success was not just about talent or luck. It was about consistency, learning from mistakes, and seizing opportunities when they arose. The CEO continued to mentor him closely. They met regularly to discuss progress, challenges, and strategies. The CEO shared insights not just about business, but about life, how to handle setbacks, how to build relationships, and how to stay motivated even when results were slow. Each conversation left him feeling inspired and more capable. During this time, he also noticed personal changes. He slept better, ate more regularly, and even found himself smiling more. His confidence grew, not in a boastful way, but quietly, steadily. He began to see himself differently, not as someone who failed repeatedly, but as someone who was capable of growth, learning, and meaningful contribution. One evening, after finishing a particularly challenging task, he stayed behind to review the work. The office was quiet, filled only with the hum of computers and the faint sound of traffic outside. He reflected on how far he had come from sitting at the back of a seminar with nothing but $50 in his pocket. 2 leading important tasks in a growing division. The journey had been tough, filled with doubt and fear, but it had also been transformative. He thought about the people who had doubted him, the moments when he felt like giving up, and the times he had questioned his own abilities. And he realized something profound. Every struggle, every setback, every fear had prepared him for this moment. They had made him resilient, determined, and ready to embrace opportunities. The CEO's mentorship continued to shape him. The guidance he received was practical, encouraging, and empowering. He was learning not just how to succeed in a company, but how to approach life with confidence, responsibility, and a growth mindset. The lessons extended beyond the office, influencing the way he handled personal challenges, relationships, and his own sense of self-worth as the days turned into weeks. He began to see tangible results from his efforts. The project he had initially feared was taking shape, showing progress that even colleagues began to notice. His contributions were valued, his ideas respected, and his dedication acknowledged. He was no longer just someone struggling to survive. He was becoming someone who mattered, someone capable of making an impact. Looking back, he understood that the $50 he had risked at the seminar was more than money. It was a symbol of courage, hope, and willingness to take a chance on himself. That small risk had opened the door to mentorship, growth, and opportunities he had never imagined. And now, with each passing day, he was proving to himself that he could rise above circumstances, embrace challenges, and shape his own future. By the end of part 3, he had transformed from a man desperate for hope into a person ready to seize real opportunities. The journey was far from over, but he had discovered the first important truth. When courage meets guidance, even the smallest step can lead to life-changing results. He was no longer just surviving. He was beginning to thrive. The new project was bigger, more complex, and far more demanding than anything he had experienced before. Every morning he woke up with a sense of both anticipation and pressure. He knew that the work would push him to his limits. But he also understood that this was the opportunity he had been waiting for, the chance to truly prove himself. To rise above the life of struggle that had defined him for so long. The office had a different energy now. Teams were busy planning, coordinating, and executing ideas. Meetings were longer, discussions more intense, and expectations higher. For him, every day was a test. There were moments when he felt overwhelmed by the volume of tasks, by the need to understand new concepts, and by the responsibility to lead a portion of the project. Yet, despite the pressure, felt alive in a way he hadn't felt for years. The CEO was always there. It's not to do the work for him, but to guide him through it. Their conversations were frequent, sometimes casual, sometimes intense. The CEO asked questions that forced him to think critically, to analyze problems deeply, and to find solutions independently. "I'm not here to give you answers," the CEO said one day. "I'm here to help you discover them yourself." That is the skill that lasts longer than any instruction. He took those words to heart. There were times when he wanted to give up, when a mistake felt like the end of the world, or when a challenge seemed too complex to handle. But each time he paused, reflected, and asked for guidance. He found that the process of working through the problem taught him more than any success alone could have. Slowly, he began to see that failure was not a threat, but a teacher, and persistence was the bridge to growth. One morning, a critical issue arose in the project. Data had been miscalculated, timelines were off, and tensions were high among the team members. People were frustrated, blaming each other, and morale was low. He could feel the panic building in the room, and for a moment, he thought he might crumble under the pressure. But then he remembered all the lessons he had learned so far, the courage to start, persistence to continue, and the guidance of someone who believed in him. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I think we can fix this," he said calmly. "Let's break it down step by step and see where the problem began. If we work together, I'm confident we can meet the deadline and deliver what's needed." At first, there were skeptical looks. Some people doubted that he could handle the pressure, that he had the experience to lead. But his calm determination began to shift the mood. He assigned tasks, asked questions, and listened to suggestions. Slowly, the chaos began to organize itself. By the end of the day, the issue had been resolved, and the project was back on track. The CEO noticed the effort and the way he had handled the team. "You did well today," the CEO said in a quiet tone that carried deep approval. "Leadership is not about giving orders. It's about guiding people through challenges, inspiring them, showing them that solutions are possible even when things seem impossible. Today you showed that." His heart swelled with pride. For so long, he had felt invisible, powerless, and incapable. Now, he realized that he was capable not just of surviving, but of leading, influencing, and creating results. The feeling was exhilarating but also humbling. He knew that this was only the beginning, that the road ahead would be filled with even greater challenges, and that he had to remain focused, patient, and diligent. The days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, his skills improved. He learned to manage time effectively, to communicate clearly with different teams, and to anticipate problems before they became crises. The CEO continued to mentor him, sharing strategies for dealing with complex situations, giving advice on negotiation, and teaching lessons about resilience and adaptability. One evening, he stayed late at the office, reviewing data and preparing reports for an important presentation the next day. The room was quiet, except for the low hum of the computer and the occasional footsteps in the hallway. He paused for a moment, reflecting on the journey so far. It had been less than a month since he had risked his last $50 at a seminar. Yet his life had changed in ways he never imagined. He thought about his apartment, the struggles, the loneliness, and the fear that had once dominated his days. Those memories were still there, but they no longer felt like chains. They were reminders of how far he had come, of the courage he had shown, and of the persistence that had brought him to this moment. He realized that his life was no longer defined by fear or scarcity, but by opportunity, growth, and the choices he was willing to make the next day. He presented his findings to the project team, and the CEO. His presentation was clear, detailed, and well-structured. He spoke confidently, answered questions thoughtfully, and provided solutions that addressed the most challenging aspects of the project. For the first time in his life, he felt like his voice mattered, like his ideas had value, and like he was contributing to something meaningful. The CEO listened quietly, nodding occasionally. When the presentation ended, the CEO leaned back and smiled. "I'm impressed," he said. "You handled a difficult situation, coordinated with multiple teams, and delivered a solution that works. That's not easy, and you did it well. I want you to remember this feeling, the confidence, the accomplishment, the knowledge that you can handle more than you thought. It will carry you far." The praise filled him with a mixture of pride and gratitude. He realized that success was not just about reaching a goal, but about the growth along the way, the lessons learned, and the perseverance shown during challenges. Each day of hard work, each moment of doubt overcome, and each step forward had contributed to building not just his skills, but his character. Despite the progress, challenges continued to arise. There were moments when tasks seemed insurmountable, when deadlines felt impossible, and when team conflicts threatened to derail the project. Each challenge tested his patience, creativity, and ability to remain calm under pressure. He learned to approach problems methodically, to communicate clearly, and to lead by example rather than by authority. Slowly, he began to see that leadership was not about being in control of others, but about guiding, supporting, and empowering them to achieve shared goals. One particularly stressful day, a major setback occurred. A critical piece of data was missing, threatening to delay the project by several days. The team was frustrated, some members arguing, others silent and worried. He felt a surge of panic but quickly pushed it aside. He gathered the team, outlined a plan to locate the missing information, and delegated tasks based on each member's strengths. He stayed calm, provided guidance, and reassured everyone that the problem could be solved. By the end of the day, the missing data had been found. The project was back on track, and the team's morale was restored. The CEO observed the situation and later said, "Today, you demonstrated something important. Leadership is not about being perfect. It's about facing uncertainty, making decisions, and inspiring confidence even when things are difficult. You did that today. Remember it." That evening, he walked home through the city streets, feeling exhausted but fulfilled. The lights of the buildings, the sound of traffic, and the movement of people felt alive in a way he hadn't noticed before. He reflected on his journey from sitting in a crowded seminar with nothing but hope and $50, to managing real challenges in a growing project, to leading a team through setbacks. Each step had been hard, but each step had been worth it. He thought about the CEO, who had given him guidance, belief, and opportunity. The man had not done the work for him. He had taught him to believe in himself, to take responsibility, and to grow through action. That mentorship had changed everything. He realized that while skills and knowledge were important, guidance and belief from someone who saw potential in him had been even more transformative. Over the next few weeks, he continued to grow. He learned to balance tasks, communicate effectively with colleagues, and manage time efficiently. He faced more setbacks, more mistakes, and more challenges, but each one became a stepping stone. The CEO's mentorship remained consistent, offering advice, encouragement, an insight that helped him navigate the complexities of work and life. Slowly, he began to notice changes in himself beyond the office. He felt more confident in personal interactions, more patient when faced with challenges, and more determined to pursue his goals. He realized that growth was not confined to professional skills. It extended to mindset, character, and the way he approached life. By the end of Part 4, he had transformed significantly. He was no longer the man who had risked $50 out of desperation. He was someone who had faced real challenges, learned to lead, and begun to shape his own future. The path ahead was still uncertain, filled with opportunities and obstacles. But he now possessed the skills, mindset, and confidence to continue moving forward. He had discovered that courage, persistence, and guidance could turn even the smallest chance into life-changing growth. The journey was far from over. But he now understood the truth. Real transformation came not from luck, but from effort, learning, and the willingness to embrace challenges. He was ready for whatever came next, and he felt, for the first time in a long time, that he was truly capable of success. Months passed, and with each passing day, his life changed in ways he had once thought impossible. The small victories that had seemed insignificant at first began to accumulate, forming a foundation of confidence, skill, and hope. He had moved from a state of desperation to one of progress, learning to navigate challenges, lead teams, and make decisions that had real impact. The transformation wasn't sudden, but steady, built on persistence, courage, and guidance. The project that had once seemed overwhelming was now taking shape successfully. His leadership, ideas, and attention to detail had contributed directly to its progress, and his colleagues began to recognize his ability. No longer did they question his skills or doubted his presence. Instead, they sought his input, valued his perspective, and trusted his decisions. It was a feeling he had never experienced before, one of true belonging, respect, and influence. The CEO continued to mentor him, offering not just professional guidance, but life lessons that resonated deeply. Success isn't about the work you do alone, the CEO said during one late afternoon meeting. It's about growth, relationships, persistence, and belief. And you've shown all of those qualities. That's why you're here, and why you can go further than most. Hearing these words, he felt a mix of pride and humility. Pride, because he had worked hard, learned, and proven himself. Humility, because he realized that he had relied on guidance, mentorship, and the belief of someone who saw potential in him when he had none in himself. He understood now that success was not a solo journey. It was built with support, trust, and collaboration. One morning, the CEO called him into his office with a serious expression. He wondered if he had done something wrong, but the tone of the office felt different this time. The CEO gestured to a chair across the desk. "Sit," he said. He obeyed, curiosity and nervousness mingling in his chest. "I want to discuss your future," the CEO began. "You've done exceptionally well, more than I expected. The project has benefited greatly from your work, but I believe you are ready for something more, a position with real responsibility. A chance to shape strategy, mentor others, and lead in a way that can make a lasting impact." His heart raced. He had imagined success, dreamed about opportunities, but hearing it in real life, from someone who had watched him grow, was almost unbelievable. I'm ready," he said, though a part of him still wondered if he truly was. The CEO smiled, leaning back. "I don't offer guarantees. Success still depends on your effort, dedication, and willingness to continue learning. But I believe you can handle it. You've already proven your determination and ability to grow under pressure. Now it's time to take the next step." He left the office that day with a sense of exhilaration he hadn't felt since he first risked that $50. It wasn't just the promotion or the recognition or the responsibility, it was the realization that he had transformed. The man who had once felt powerless, hopeless, and invisible was no longer the same. Every choice, every effort, every challenge had brought him here. The weeks that followed were a period of adjustment. New responsibilities meant longer hours, more complex tasks, and decisions that carried greater weight. Yet he faced them with confidence. He applied the lessons learned from the CEO: patience, persistence, humility, and strategic thinking. Mistakes still happened, as they always would, but each one became an opportunity to improve, to adapt, and to grow stronger. Outside the office, his life also improved. Financial stability allowed him to move into a better apartment, with enough space to feel comfortable and safe. He ate properly, slept well, and found a rhythm to life that had been absent during months of struggle. But more importantly, he carried a sense of purpose and hope. Each morning was no longer about surviving, it was about building, creating, and moving forward. He also began to think about giving back. He remembered the countless days when no one had helped him, when opportunities had seemed out of reach, and when hope had felt distant. He wanted to support others who were struggling, to offer guidance, encouragement, and opportunities, just as he had received. It became clear to him that success wasn't just about personal achievement. It was about using what he had learned to uplift others. One day, he received an invitation to speak at a small seminar, similar to the one that had changed his life. He hesitated at first, remembering how nervous he had felt sitting in the back row months ago, unsure if he could even take the first step. But he realized that sharing his story could inspire someone else. Just as the seminar and the CEO had inspired him, standing before the audience, he spoke honestly about his journey. He talked about fear, desperation, and the moment he risked his last $50. He described the mentorship that had guided him, the lessons he had learned, and the challenges he had faced along the way. He spoke not to boast, but to show that change was possible, that courage and persistence could transform a life, and that believing in oneself, sometimes with a little help from others, could open doors that once seemed closed forever. The audience listened intently. Some had tears in their eyes, others nodded in understanding. Afterward, several people approached him, asking questions, seeking advice, or simply thanking him for sharing his story. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment. For the first time, he understood that his struggles had value. They had shaped him into someone capable of making a difference in the lives of others. Back at the office, the CEO called him into a meeting once again. "I've been watching you," the CEO said. "Not just your work, but how you interact with others, how you handle challenges, and how you've grown as a person. I want you to know that you've surpassed even my expectations. You are no longer just an employer, a leader, a mentor, and an example for others to follow." The words filled him with pride and gratitude. He remembered the man he had been months ago, the uncertainty, the fear, the loneliness, and realized how far he had come. The journey had not been easy, but it had been real, meaningful, and transformative. Every late night, every challenge, every mistake, and every small victory had contributed to the person he had become. He thought about the $50 he had risked, the seminar that had sparked hope, and the CEO who had believed in him when no one else did. Each element of that journey had been a stepping stone, guiding him toward growth, opportunity, and transformation. He understood now that life often presents chances in unexpected ways, and the willingness to take them can change everything. Over time, he became an integral part of the company's leadership team. He contributed to strategic decisions, mentored new employees, and helped shape the culture of collaboration and growth. He applied the lessons he had learned: patience, persistence, humility, and courage, not just to work, but to life itself. He also began initiatives to support struggling individuals outside the company. He organized workshops, shared mentorship opportunities, and created small programs to guide others who were trying to overcome challenges similar to those he had faced. His own journey had taught him that guidance, encouragement, and opportunity could change a life, and he wanted to pay that forward. One evening, as he reflected on his journey, he realized something profound. Life had not handed him success easily. It had tested him, challenged him, and forced him to confront fear, doubt, and failure. But through persistence, courage, and the guidance of someone who believed in him, he had transformed. He was no longer the man who risked his last $50 out of desperation. He was a person who had learned to believe in himself, to embrace opportunities, and to grow continuously. He remembered the nights of anxiety, the small victories, and the moments of doubt that had defined his early journey. Each memory was a reminder of the power of perseverance, the value of mentorship, and the impact of courage. He had discovered that life-changing moments often begin with small risks, small acts of hope, and the willingness to step forward even when the path is unclear. Looking back, he understood that success was not a destination, it was a journey, shaped by choices, actions, and relationships. It was about growth, resilience, and the courage to keep moving forward despite setbacks. And he realized that his journey was not just about him. It was about inspiring and guiding others, showing that even the smallest chance could lead to extraordinary change. The man who had once sat in the back row of a seminar, with only $50 in hope in his pocket, was now standing in a position of influence, mentorship, and purpose. He had learned that courage, persistence, and guidance could transform a life. He had become living proof of that truth. As he walked through the city streets one evening, reflecting on the journey, he smiled quietly to himself. The lights of the buildings, the hum of traffic, and the movement of people felt different now. They were no longer reminders of struggle or isolation. They were symbols of opportunity, growth, and possibility. He knew the road ahead would still have challenges. Life would continue to test him, to present obstacles, and to demand courage and effort, but he was no longer afraid. He had learned to face challenges with resilience, to embrace opportunities with determination, and to grow from every experience. And as he continued forward, he carried with him the lessons of the journey, the courage to take risks, the value of mentorship, the power of persistence, and the importance of giving back. He had transformed not just his circumstances, but himself, and he knew that transformation was only the beginning.